For over 2 decades, Sephiroth has been synonymous with Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy VII is the face of the franchise after all, and even though the game is full of iconic and instantly recognizable characters, none of them, perhaps with the exception of Cloud Strife and maybe Tifa Lockhart, have had as much of an impact on the culture of this game as Sephiroth. Over the last couple of weeks, as we count down to the highly anticipated launch of Final Fantasy VII Remake, we've been taking a look at the stories of each individual primary character in the game one by one, and it is now time to look at none other than Sephiroth himself. So without further ado, let's begin. Though Sephiroth plays the role of a primary antagonist in Final Fantasy VII and much of the game's extended universe, his story actually begins nearly 3 decades before the beginning of the game, 27 years to be precise, which is when Sephiroth's parents, Shinra employees Professor Hojo and a woman named Lucretia Crescent, conceived him. At the time, Hojo and Lucretia were working as assistants to Professor Gast, who was then the top scientist Shinra had and was leading the Jenova project. The centerpiece of this project were the remains of, you guessed it, Jenova. Shinra initially mistakenly took Jenova to be one of the Cetra, an ancient tribe of people that were said to have a deep connection with the planet and its life stream, things that they figured would be very useful to them in their search for the Promised Land as part of the Neo-Midgar project, all of which we've covered extensively in our look at Shinra not too long ago. What Jenova really was, however, was an ancient extraterrestrial being that had landed on Gaia thousands of years ago, and after being involved in a furious conflict with the Cetra and squaring off against the massive biomechanical defense system of the planet collectively known as the Weapons, was defeated. With Shinra's inaccurate assumptions that Jenova was a Cetra, however, Professor Hojo figured that if he could infuse its cells with those of others, he could create a person with the powers of a Cetra. The person he chose for that ill-advised experiment was, horrifyingly enough, his own unborn child. He injected Lucretia's belly with Jenova's cells, which infused with the fetus inside her. When the child Sephiroth was born, he was immediately taken away by Shinra. His own mother never even got to hold him, and throughout his childhood he was told that his mother's name was Jenova, while his father was never even mentioned to him. Sephiroth did not develop the powers of a Cetra for obvious reasons, but he did have abilities. He was a gifted warrior, and soon he had joined Shinra's soldier program. Throughout his years at Shinra, he grew to respect and admire Professor Gast, while Professor Hojo, who he didn't know was his own father. Eventually, when Shinra got involved in a conflict with the nation of Wutai due to disagreements over their proposals to erect Mako facilities within their territory, Sephiroth became one of the fiercest warriors in the war. He quickly rose through the ranks of soldier to first class, and by the time the conflict was over, he was viewed as a war hero and something of a legend within soldier. Many vital characters in the universe of Final Fantasy VII, such as fellow soldier Genesis Rhapsodos and wannabe soldier Cloud Strife, would go on to idolize him. Shinra, being the corrupt megacorp that they are, would use Sephiroth standing to their advantage as well, using him for their own propaganda machine as much as they could. Not long after the Wutai War died down, however, Shinra became embroiled in even more conflicts. The anti-Shinra group Avalanche took up arms against the megacorp, and Sephiroth was involved in quelling that uprising as well. Another conflict that arose saw Shinra going up against one of its own, former soldier Genesis, who rose up against Shinra in a brutal war called the Genesis War. The biggest turning point in the life and story of Sephiroth comes as part of this very war, when Shinra sends out a party to investigate a monster outbreak at the Mako reactor near the village of Nibelheim, thought to have been engineered by Genesis. Sephiroth is accompanied by fellow soldier Zack Fair, as well as 2 Shinra infantrymen, one of whom is a young man named Cloud Strife. It is during this incursion to Nibelheim that Sephiroth begins to learn the true nature of his birth, and comes to understand why he has been so different from everyone else around him. With some prods from Genesis and with a few discoveries of his own, Sephiroth learns about the Jenova project, and soon dives deep into Shinra's research to find out more about it, and his part. Sephiroth comes to believe that Jenova was part of the Cetra tribe, and that having been born of its cells, he is now the last surviving Cetra on Gaia. Sephiroth also comes to the false conclusion that 2,000 years ago, the Cetra were wiped out by a devastating calamity, during following which they were betrayed by humanity to fend for themselves. Funnily enough, the calamity that very early wiped out the Cetra back then had been Jenova itself. Sephiroth's hatred for humanity grows, and he promises to Jenova that he will avenge the Cetra people and will find the Promised Land. The first part of his fight against humanity comes when he destroys the town of Nibelheim, setting it ablaze and killing nearly every single person still in there, with very few managing to escape from the ensuing destruction. Zack Fair and Cloud Strife face off against Sephiroth in an attempt to put a stop to his actions, and using Zack's Buster Sword, Cloud is able to throw Sephiroth into a pool of Mako. Sephiroth is declared killed in action as Shinra attempts to cover up the truth of the Nibelheim incident, but the former soldier is, of course, far from dead. He finds himself falling into the life stream where he remains for some time, constantly accruing new knowledge and power. The fragments of his body gradually come together and form up in a Mako cocoon in the North Crater, and from there, Sephiroth continues to pull the strings for some time to come. That's because Sephiroth exerts a certain level of control and influence over all those with Jenova cells, and in the years following the Nibelheim incident, the likes of Zack Fair, Cloud Strife, and many others are captured, experimented upon, and injected with Jenova cells. As per Professor Hojo and the reunion theory, Jenova cells will always and constantly try to find their way back to each other, and though Zack Fair has died by the time Final Fantasy VII's story kicks off, Cloud, who is still very much alive, begins to feel the effects of this reunion phenomenon, though that, of course, is something he doesn't fully realize until much later. And what is Sephiroth's plan now? Well, his ultimate goal is to conquer the world and defeat all of humanity, which he now sees as his enemy, and to do that, he needs to become much more powerful. So Sephiroth devises a plan that will involve him using the black materia to summon Meteor, the most devastating form of black magic, to rend a hole in the surface of the planet. At this point, the planet will send up massive amounts of lifestream to heal itself, but Sephiroth plans to be there at the moment of impact to absorb all of the lifestream, and after growing tremendously in power, and he plans to do so at the North Crater, an area with large amounts of lifestream, which some, including many at Shinra, believe to be the fabled Promised Land. At the time Sephiroth puts out the call to summon all his clones 5 years after his supposed death, the remains of Jenova in Shinra's headquarters of Midgar also awaken. Jenova shapeshifts and takes the form of Sephiroth, and as him, lays waste to Shinra's headquarters, also killing President Shinra himself. Upon seeing the corpse, Cloud and his companions realize that Sephiroth is the one behind this. Cloud, looking to settle the score for what Sephiroth did at his hometown of Nibelheim, decides to set off alongside his companions to look for him and put a stop to his plans. What he doesn't know, however, is that his drive to find Sephiroth is actually coming from the Jenova cells within him looking to reunite with those in Sephiroth. Throughout their journey across the planet, they have a few encounters with Sephiroth, or with Jenova's remains, which have taken the shape of Sephiroth to be more precise. And the most fateful one of these encounters proves to take the life of Aerith. Aerith, as the true last surviving Cetra, has the power to stop Sephiroth, and hopes to use the white materia to summon the ultimate form of white magic and fight against Meteor to prevent it from falling on the planet. Jenova as Sephiroth, however, is able to kill her, sending her to the life stream. Sephiroth eventually manages to summon Meteor, and while Aerith was able to summon the ultimate form of white magic before dying, Sephiroth has been using his powers to hold it back. Things come to a head when, with some unlikely help from Shinra and their Mako cannon, which they call the Sister Ray, Cloud and company are able to reach Sephiroth's true physical form in the North Crater. By this time, Sephiroth's powers have grown immensely, but in a climactic duel, Cloud and the rest of the party are able to defeat him, sending him into the lifestream as well. Sensing that Sephiroth isn't really gone and wanting to truly put things to an end, Cloud follows him into the lifestream. In a final fateful metaphysical battle between the two, Cloud is able to truly defeat him. This allows the ultimate form of white magic to be released, and Meteor is successfully stopped. Of course, even though Sephiroth is defeated and killed in Final Fantasy VII, that isn't the end of his story. He reappears once again in the animated film Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, which takes place 2 years after the events of Final Fantasy VII itself. 3 young silver-haired men, Kadaj, Laz, and Yazoo, prove to be the catalyst for his return. The manifestation of Sephiroth's surviving will and consciousness, though they believe that their actions are guided by their mother, Jenova. It is actually Sephiroth himself who is somehow controlling their actions, and through those 3, Sephiroth is able to restore himself to life. Sephiroth plans to taint the lifestream with countless who have died of a deadly new disease called geostigma, geostigma, which is caused by the bits of Genova's consciousness that still lurk in the life stream. By infecting the entire life stream, Sephiroth intends to take control of all of it, and through it, the entire planet, which he then means to use to travel through space and time to find a different planet to rule. He is, however, defeated by Cloud once again, while Aerith, who is still in the life stream, is able to rid the planet of geostigma. That is, canonically, the last we see of Sephiroth, though knowing him, there's every chance that he survived that as well. More importantly, though, what's really exciting is that very soon we will all get to experience the most iconic parts of his story, some of them anyway, very soon once again. Final Fantasy VII Remake is right around the corner, and Sephiroth is once again going to take center stage, and we can't wait to see Sephiroth back in action once more. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, please hit the subscribe button. Also, don't forget to switch on the notifications bell icon next to it. That way you'll never miss any of our videos. Thanks for watching.